Evidence of everything that's written down. And again, the only reason why I'm here today, because I would have been sitting right there, without any comments. But there's no retaliation for me anymore. So this is my opportunity to speak up. Because Ms. Dunn used to always refer to me as someone falling on a sword. So I guess today I'm falling on the sword for my property managers. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. And just so the board's aware, I did receive the communication, have forwarded to Mr. Alexander, and asked that be included. Mr. Alexander, per my request, I would ask that there be at least a review of this information so that the board can consider this at an HR committee, which we will establish and go through today. Is there any other public comment? Nobody online, correct? Excellent. Hearing none, I will go ahead and close public comment. If you take a look at your agenda today, we have an agency financial overview. But before we do that, I would like to move the officer election and standing committees to the top of our list, please, so that we can be in proper posture before we continue on today. I apologize to the group. I failed to make that change on the agenda before it came out. So we're going to move officer elections, which is item number 7, to our next order of business. So as the board is aware, we need to elect officers. We now have enough people to elect officers again. And as such, we would open up the floor and entertain officer positions. We can do this either through a committee, a slate of people to serve, or one by one. I would be honored to continue to serve as chair. I have some other thoughts around people, but I'll open it up to the group as to whether they'd like to do an en banc approval of a slate, or if we'd like to go one by one. Commissioner Brock.
Mr. Chair, should we approve our minutes first before we do the officers?
I was going to put us in proper posture first so that we have formally elected members, so when we conduct the full purpose of this meeting, we're conducting it with, officers that are, appointed for this meeting. So Yeah, no, thank you. Commissioner,
Are we going one by one?
if that's easiest, let's do it. So there would have to be a motion, a nomination, and then a vote if we go by one by one.
I'll make a motion to nominate you to continue serving as chair, Chris.
Thank you. So there's a motion. Is there any other motions to appoint or have somebody serve as chair?
Make a second.
Is anybody else looking to, oh shoot, run as chair for chair? Hearing none, I believe, I guess we can technically formally vote, correct?
Yeah, you should, and in fact, when somebody puts forth a motion for one person for one office position, you just need to dispense with that motion. So either it's gonna be approved or it's gonna be failed, it's gonna fail, so you don't have to have you can't have a motion with 5 names in it, that makes sense. You
Yeah.
do one by one. So
Perfect.
You're in good posture.
Awesome. So with that, we have a motion for me to continue as chair for the next, I guess it would be,
Through
So-
September 30th?
of this year, correct? September 30th this year. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you all very much. I will continue to do my best here. Next, we have the vice chair positions. Do we have any parties that would wish to nominate or be nominated for vice chair? Commissioner Brock.
I'd like to be nominated for vice chair.
I have a nomination for vice chair. Is there anybody else?
I mean, we just talking openly, or we?
We're talking openly. Yep, I'll leave it open for discussion.
I mean, I was gonna nominate Mr. Green, Commissioner Green, but, I guess it would have to, he has to be willing to serve.
Okay, so there's at least, Mr. Green, would you entertain the nomination if nominated?
Yes, I would.
Okay. So I have Commissioner Brock and Commissioner Green that have expressed interest. Is there anybody else that's expressed interest? So before we go through and vote on a one by one, correct, Ms. Hodges?
Yeah, I mean, you got 2 people here, so if somebody wants to move one of those names, either it's gonna pass, and if it passes, then that means that's your chair. If the board consensus is that they don't like that person, then it's gonna fail.
Correct.
And you would just move to the second person since there's just 2.
Understood. I will, so I'll open, I can open up for discussion, can I not? Yeah, of course. I'll open up for discussion. So I had, would be honored to serve with either of you. I will say, Ms. Brock, I was going to ask you to serve as treasurer for a host of reasons, which is a new position we don't technically have at this point, correct, Ms. Hodges?
Let me check, let's see, positions, chair, vice chair, secretary, yeah, you don't have a treasurer.
Correct.
That's required.
That's required. But I will leave that up to the working group, and I can explain what I was looking for there, Ms. Brock, which is, as treasurer, I'm looking for somebody to help me understand and look at the way we expense funds for purposes of our general population. So one of the things that I'm still trying to gain a better understanding on is how we can supplement services financially to our tenants. And that, to me, seemed to be a very good spot for you, because you would know what we do or do not need from allocating resources from that perspective. But that said, we'll certainly honor your desire to serve as vice chair. Do we have a motion to approve either individual?
Well, I've got for discussion still. I've only met Commissioner Brock once, and this is the first time I'm meeting Commissioner Green. Is there maybe some information I could get of why one, or I'm not just voting blind here?
Sure. Why don't we, Commissioner Brock, would you like to start?
Yes, well, I've been a commissioner now for 4 years. I've served as the interim chair on the board. I also served for a few minutes, as the vice chair. So all of them was not a long period of time. I served as the secretary of the board the longest, and so that's what I've done since I've been here.
Commissioner Green?
Yes, I've been on the board just over a year, served as a finance chair. Chris and I were somewhat almost elected together, or he was a little bit before me, and then I guess just natural progression would be the vice chair.
Okay. Does anybody want to put forth a motion?
So moved.
Which one? Nice try, Commissioner Griggs.
I mean,
It's all kind of, I'm nominating Mr. Green since I'm.
You've nominated Mr. Green, so I have a nomination on the table. We need to vote on that nomination, so if I could, those in favor of Mr. Green as vice chair signify by saying aye. Aye. Oh,
Did you get, second, was there a motion? Craig second said no.
I had a motion that wasn't.
Motion and Green is.
I thought you mentioned that since there's only, we have to nominate one at a time, there wouldn't need to be,
Oh, no, that's not what I was saying.
Okay.
I was saying that, you know, whoever you nominate into the position, you need a motion.
Got it.
To affect that. That's what I was trying to say. I'm sorry if it wasn't clear.
So we do then have a proper motion on the table for Mr. Green as vice chair. Is there a second?
I'm sorry, can we go back? I just, Commissioner Brock, just would like to get your thoughts on, it seems like you don't like the suggestion for the role, and I'd just like to understand why, if the commissioner thought that that's the best fit for you and for the housing authority. Is it just that you're not interested?
Oh, no. I didn't know I didn't know that our chair, oh, are we able to speak?
Yeah,
like this?
absolutely.
I didn't know that the chair was gonna even make a nomination for treasurer. I have served, as the treasurer before on the board. It was a short period of time because we had some things that went on with the board, so we had to reconstruct. So I served in that office for a short period of time, not a long period of time. But I have no problems with, you know, even when the chair last year nominated me for secretary, I had no problem in serving in that office capacity either. So I have no problem in serving, you know, because that's what I'm here for. And so, no, I have no problem in serving in any of the capacities.
I just say that out of respect for our chair, who we just gave another few months to, if he thinks that's the best thing for our leadership, that we should respect that and move to appoint you as the treasurer. And then secondly, move to appoint Mr. Green as vice chair.
And in fairness to Commissioner Brock, thank you, Sunshine. We were not able to discuss this prior to the meeting, but one of the things last year that we did was reallocate dollars, surplus dollars from certain line items to more resident services. And I think it's important that this year, especially with, you know, where the economy is, you're still seeing the articles about rent, we figure out if those dollars are actually making an impact, and having somebody from the board to be able to better understand, you know, are those dollars making an impact, yes or no? If no, where should we be redeploying them? My thought process was that you would be an ideal fit for this, as we don't live the day-to-day. We don't understand, you know, what we can be doing better, and frankly, I think sometimes you get a more transparent conversation than even what Mr. Alexander was able to have with some of our residents. So we have any further discussion?
I think we need a second.
We still need a second
I'm doing a motion first.
on a motion for Mr. Green.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor of appointing Mr. Green as vice chair of the board signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Green. Commissioner?
thank you.
Next one I would like to elect is treasurer. Ms. Brock, as I mentioned, I would really appreciate you serving this role for the variety of reasons that I've talked about. And I know Mr. Alexander, we've spoken, and we've got some things we want to go through with you about that if you're willing to serve. So can I get a motion for Ms. Brock to serve as the board's treasurer? I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I have a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none. And then last but not least, we have the secretary position. Mr. Griggs? I'm hoping that you would be willing to serve as secretary. value your opinion, and also, you know, I realize there's not a ton to do, but from time to time there is, which I'd appreciate your thoughts on.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a problem accepting, just know that I transition off in October.
We understand.
So there should be some type of prep for real-time handoff.
We're gonna be, it's on the agenda this year to make sure we elect in September,
Right.
so that we have a plan in place.
Thank you.
Yeah. Could I get a motion, or a nominate, or I guess I need a motion, please?
I make a motion that Mr. Briggs would serve as secretary.
I have a motion. I have a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, I believe that fills the chair, or excuse me, let's see, we have secretary, treasurer, vice chair, and chair. At this point, I think that fills the officer elections. Next, we need to go through the standing committee assignments. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Hodges, I went back and looked at my notes. This is, I can appoint, obviously, we wouldn't want to appoint somebody that does not want to serve, but I have the ability to appoint. So the first we have on the finance, Commissioner Horovitz, would you be willing to serve on finance? Thank you. Commissioner Shoup, would you be willing to serve on finance?
Sure.
And Commissioner Green, would you be willing to serve on finance?
Yes, I would like to, are we nominating chairs for finance?
I'm sorry?
Are we going to nominate chairs?
We will, yes. I would like Commissioner Horovitz to serve as the chair of finance if you're so willing.
Absolutely.
Is there anybody else that would like to join the finance chair? Or finance committee, apologies. Yes.
Just keep in mind too, you should also appoint a vice chair.
Oh, of the committee.
You need a chair, you appoint a chair and a vice chair.
Yeah, so I don't think we need to vote on chair.
We don't need to vote on chair, vice chair, no.
Mm-mm. It's just your,
Purview.
yes.
Yes, which, Mr. Shoup, it sounds like you're willing to serve as vice chair of that committee, so thank you very much. This will teach
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
This will teach you, Mr. Shoup. Next, was there anybody else that was interested in serving on the Finance Committee? Commissioner Brock, would you like to be on it as well? Great, we'll appoint Commissioner Brock as the, on the Finance Committee as well. So we have 4 members on Finance.
So just from my understanding, you're agreeing to serve as my vice chair? Okay.
Correct. Yep. Next, Asset Management. We are going to, this, yep,
There is no asset management.
Nope.
So pursue your bylaws.
this will end up being an ad hoc.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, it needs to be moved to,
Governance and oversight, is that, where is that?
so governance and oversight is, are they a standing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we'll have to amend your bylaws and.
Yeah, no, we're not doing
Do
that.
an amendment to the bylaws, you gotta do that ahead of time, so.
No. So the standing committees that we have, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Hodges, are governance, oversight, finance, and that's it.
No, tenant
No.
relations.
Oh, tenant relations, thank you. So let's deal with the governance committee next. Recall that this committee is really the committee that will look at policies, procedures of the board, making sure that we're going through those things. Commissioner Green as vice chair, I'm hoping that you can serve on that committee. Governance. Commissioner Griggs, I'm hoping you'd be willing to serve on that committee. And Commissioner Shoup, I'm hoping you'd be willing to serve on that committee.
Here at the pleasure of the chair.
Commissioner Green, would you be willing to chair that committee for me? And Commissioner Griggs, if you could vice chair that committee for me, I'd be very grateful. Anybody else want to serve on the governance committee? Otherwise, I will consider that matter handled.
What's involved in the governance committee?
Governance is really overseeing the policies and procedures of this board, as well as looking at the overall policies of the agency that may be, we may want to consider from time to time.
Yeah, I don't think I would want to be the chairman of that committee.
Understood. Commissioner Griggs, would you be willing to serve as chair of that committee?
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Griggs.
Sure.
Commissioner Shue, would you be willing to serve as vice chair of that committee?
Vice chair times 2.
Vice chair times 2.
You're going to be busy.
Commissioner Brock?
I want to serve on that.
And Commissioner Brock would like to serve as well, so I'd like to appoint her to that committee. Ms. Hodges, do we have any other standing committees at this point? Tenant relations, resident relations, thank you. Commissioner Brock, would you be willing to serve and chair that committee, please? I would like to also be, I'll put myself on that committee this year. Commissioner Horvitz, would you be willing to serve on that committee as well for tenant-resident relations?
I think that we also have the acquisition committee, or is that ad hoc?
So that'll end up being ad hoc. So this is a standing committee. Which, yeah, it's a standing committee.
I'm reluctant to make the commitment.
Actually, I'm going to do something maybe a little bit out of the ordinary. I'm going to appoint all members of the board to the Resident Relations Tenant Committee, and members should make it when and if they can. However, I do think that this is important that we all take a very proactive approach to our resident tenant relations, and as such, we can meet and go through those. But Ms. Brock, if you'd be willing to serve as the chair, and I have no problem serving as vice chair on that committee.
Through the chair, I just want to make this comment for the board to consider. If you appoint all members of the board,
Uh-huh.
then you will need to have a quorum for.
Yep.
And I just make, that might, I don't, if board members can commit that they're gonna go to these meetings, but otherwise, if you don't have four members, but I just want you to keep that in mind.
Thank you. Commissioner Brock and then Commissioner Shute.
Mr. Chair, as our attorney just, informed us, the resident relations, so will that means that when we do have the resident relations meeting, which we are now hosting them every other month, we would need four?
Well, if you're gonna take action and make recommendations, but if it's the type of committee where you're never doing anything, just bear in mind, you'll just never have a quorum, and you'll have to report that up to the board, each time you're meeting. If you can't,
And that's what we
you can't get the four people, I mean, I would say in the past, have you had your committees, okay.
And therein lies part of my thought process, which is again, that committee should be one of our, it is a standing committee, it should be one of our priorities, much like finance, much like governance. And to have all of us on the committee, which means we're all equally responsible for attending, should revive its interest and what it does for this organization. So I would maintain my position that I'm appointing all of us to that committee, and if there are not quorums, we can address that at a full board meeting.
I don't
Commissioner?
So I'm just. excuse
Commissioner
me.
Brock, then Commissioner Horwitz.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly and our attorney correctly. So in order for us to have that resident relations meeting, which is scheduled for, not, for, February, excuse me, for March, we need four of the commissioners to be there.
Right, and that's just,
Well,
No.
to be clear, that's consistent, so with every single committee that you have, you need a quorum, okay?
Commissioner Shute.
But wouldn't it be, if there's going to be informational presentations but no votes are taken, we wouldn't have to have the quorum, correct?
Yeah, so our Office of General Counsel's position has always been, I mean, that's just like if you gather up 19 city council members and they're calling that a city council meeting, we're gonna say you need to have 10 city council, 14 city council members present regardless of the action that they're taking, okay? But that being said, if you have a, I think you can notate for the record that you don't have a quorum, and in effect, if there's no action that's being taken, there's no harm, there's no foul, and what it really ends up being is not a meeting of the committee, because you don't have that quorum in place, it's just members meeting. Members come, like, it's not much like a sunshine meeting, if that makes sense.
So Ms. Hodges, is there any difference if I were to appoint 6?
No, because of the seven, right. Right, and also know that, you can have a committee of one even, it's just the committee of one is still subject to the
Right.
sunshine, they have to meet, you can have a committee of two, you don't have to have, and then if members come, they just, they can come.
Yep.
But your suggestion, I want to be clear to Mrs. Brock, as the chair suggested, I think the intent is to appoint all of the members, and if it's a problem, then it could be something that's addressed at a future meeting.
Yeah.
My only comment to it, and I appreciate that at the root of what we're here for is the residents and that it's all of our responsibility to be at the meetings. I would just hate to take the authority away from Commissioner Brock to make any decisions because we've then increased the number of people she needs to have present in order to make any decisions.
Mr. Alexander or Ms. Commissioner Brock, that's a very valid point. Does the Did the committee last year make formal recommendations to the board? Do we know? Or did they come from you direct, Ms. Brock, just through your observations?
I actually made a form for the residents, so when the resident had, complaints or whatever it may have been, I always forward them to Mr. Alexander, and then Mr. Alexander would, spread them out to wherever they needed to go.
I think
I
Commissioner.
didn't bring them to the board.
Yeah, I think Commissioner, part of the purpose of doing it this way is to activate the committee in the way it's supposed to be utilized. Because at the moment, it's Ms. Brock, and we're really not making recommendations per se. We're really just passing through information to Mr. Alexander versus more of a robust discussion with residents where the boards can listen, things of that nature.
And I don't think it would be a problem either, Mr. Chair, that when we have resident relations, to have the residents to come. I mean, I can make that suggestion to them, that they can come to the board and speak, I just took the complaint forms and allowed them to fill those out and collected those out.
Yeah. Commissioner, just so you're aware, last year we tried to do a board meeting with residents at the residence location, and if there was one, I think we had one or two residents show up, maybe.
I think so.
And I got the distinct impression that maybe the board was a little too far away. And so that's kind of one of the things that I think we need to really re-up that committee to do. Mr. Alexander?
Yes, Commissioner. I just want to put out there that we do have monthly meetings every month in the community, and Ms. Brock normally attends them. And we do have staff out there, so we do have pretty much like a roundtable or a resident meeting with senior staff every single month. And I believe we hit about, completed about 10 or more in the last 3 or 4 months. So we do have a presence out on the site, so that if some issues or some concerns that the residents have, we do listen to them.
That's great. Yeah. I think this is, again, I think the intent from reading the bylaws, the intent of this committee really is to have a formal voice at the board meeting with recommendations. And I really want to, my vision for this year for this is to bring substantive recommendations via Ms. Brock and committee work. And if 4 of us can make it to these meetings, great, we can discuss it as a board. If it turns out that we're not getting quorums, we can readdress the committee at a later date. But I really think this is important for our work this year.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Finance, governance, resident relations were the standing committees, so I think we've addressed the standing committees. Okay, ad hoc committees. This year, we are going to create what I'm referring to as an asset management ad hoc committee. The reports that Mr. Alexander and his team put together every month are extremely detailed with a lot of information in it. This is above and beyond the budgets and making sure that we are meeting certain covenants. There are reports in there about the types of renovations that we're doing, about the types of work orders, what the timing of these things are, our REACT scores, details around those. Accordingly, I'm going to create an ad hoc committee called Asset Management. That committee will be responsible for reviewing in detail those reports. Yes, they are submitted with the board packet. However, I think it's important we have the opportunity to sit down with operations staff, not just Mr. Alexander, but actual operations staff, and talk through those reports. As such, I will chair that committee and would seek volunteers for me to appoint to that committee.
I just have a question.
Commissioner?
What was the thinking in separating that from finance?
I think the difference from finance is we're really diving into operational details here, meaning, a great example, work orders, right? The standard for work orders in the industry is 7 to 10 days. Is that correct, Mr. Alexander?
3 days.
3 days, thank you. But we may have work orders outstanding routinely from 7 to 10 days. We want to understand the operational impact of that, right? Section 8 voucher processing. It doesn't necessarily impact the financials, but it does the operational aspects, things of that nature.
Thank you.
Anybody else willing to serve?
I've just got a question.
Commissioner?
comment, And I don't know that I don't know if I've got, how much time I've got for that, but I'm just in the thought of, maybe this is where you're going with it, but we're a governance board, not a in-the-weeds operational board, and just kind of, if that committee, I think should keep that in mind. Like, I think it's good, and maybe if there's a workshop or something of anybody who wants to get into of how this actually works, or for general knowledge, but I'm very hesitant on us getting in the weeds on something, on a lot of things.
I agree, Commissioner. I think my vision for this board is probably no more than once per quarter, or this committee, excuse me, no more than once per quarter. And what we're really reviewing are the ultimate quarterly results and making sure that the people on this committee have a working understanding of the actual ins and out details of how we work and what the metrics are. Because I think with Commissioner Phillips leaving, my fear of Commissioner Griggs leaving, we do lack as a board some of the day-to-day operational knowledge that those commissioners have. And so I want to make sure we don't end up with a knowledge gap on, you know, the operational details. But your point is well taken. This is not meant to be in the weeds operational. This is meant to understand policy and how things work.
Sound good.
Commissioner Brock.
Yes, Mr. Chair, too, Commissioner Spoon, I want to aim this to our attorney, if she would help me on this here, to just to make sure I'm presenting it properly. When he said that we're not to get into the weeds of the operation, but wasn't that one of the things that they talked about when we went to the conference, the beginning of this month, that as commissioners, like what our chair is saying, that we should be aware of every detail that is going on here at the housing authority?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a, you know, it's a call governance-wise for the board to make. But there's no question, as fiduciaries to this organization, you should absolutely be aware of what's going on. And remember, just 3 to 4 years ago, when we had an Inspector General's report, that was one of the things that came out, where the Inspector General was like, hey, where was the oversight with some of the things that were happening on the operational side? So I definitely think board fiduciary duties, certainly you're in the weeds, but I think what Commissioner Shoup is maybe trying to draw the line with is you do have a CEO that you have delegated to, you know, run the day-to-day operations. He's the one that the employees are reporting to. So there is a line where board members should not be supervising, directing employees on a day-to-day basis. That really comes through to your CEO, and there are mechanisms for you to find out. So we talked about 360 evaluation. I mean, I can go on and on. But I think it's wherever the board wants to be. I certainly don't think you're prohibited in any way in asking for reports and asking for information and getting into the weeds as much as you want as far as having your CEO report that information to you. I don't think you're out of order with that if that's what you choose to do. Most boards don't get into the weeds like that because then you become CEOs and you're paying, there's a reason why you're paying employees and people like Dwayne to do the, you know, the work that he's doing. I hope that answers your question.
Mr. Alexander, I also want to open up to you because I think this was a committee you and I discussed that you thought would be worthwhile.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. Actually, the Asset Committee was in place when I first started here. They had only 2 committees, which was the Finance Committee and the Asset Committee, which went on for years prior to me getting here. And the Asset Committee actually looked at public housing, Section 8, resident services, IT, all the operations of the agency. And what we basically did was give them an overview. We provided the reports, and pointing back to the OIG situation from several years ago, most of the complaints in that report was, yes, there was a lack of oversight, but there was no information. There was no information or reports being generated that would have been able to provide that information. We provide that information, and one of the key things to the asset management meeting is that the board is aware of where we at in terms of numbers and can actually measure our progress with those numbers.
And again, I've put myself on this committee and chaired it because consistent with what Mr. Alexander and I've talked about, this is not an attempt to dive into operations, right? But I do believe it's an opportunity for us to make sure we understand how we are operating. And from time to time, if Mr. Alexander says, hey, we're thinking about, switching from Microsoft Office to Google Office, I don't know, what do you think, right? We're aware of conversations at that larger corporate level happening, so. So again, I've appointed myself chair, and is there anybody else that would like to serve, or should I appoint? Commissioner Brock is willing to serve.
I asked too many questions, so I'll join.
Thank you, Commissioner Shube. Commissioner Griggs, would you be interested in serving on this?
I am very interested in serving on it. Very curious about the information that's coming out of that committee.
Right.
I think we talked about that stuff.
Yep. So, and I will also appoint Commissioner Griggs
I'll serve,
and,
just so I'm in the know.
and Commissioner Green.
Yeah.
So Commissioner Horowitz, correct?
Yes,
Thank you. I keep wanting to say Horowitz.
it's a very popular.
Yeah. It looks like you're the odd commissioner out, so I apologize.
I don't feel left out.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
So with that, there will be 5 of us on that committee. Oh, yes. Commissioner Brock, would you be, actually, no, 1 second. Commissioner Griggs, would you be willing to serve as vice chair? Because I know you and I have some. Okay, fine. Commissioner Brock, you're vice chair.
No, I'm messing with you.
No, I know you are, but still,
I'm
now
messing
you've,
with you,
nope, it's
Chair.
too late. You messed with me too much, Commissioner
No,
Brock.
no,
You're it.
only because I
Nope,
did serve
board
on
chair's
that committee.
prerogative. Board chair's prerogative, Commissioner Brock. Last, I believe we have the acquisition committee. This is one that I think will be relatively active. This has a lot to do with the rubric that we've created, a lot to do with, kind of the vision and policies that we're setting. I would like to serve on this. Are there other commissioners that would like to serve on this?
I'd like to just.
Commissioner Horowitz will chair the committee. Commissioner Brock is on the committee. I am on the committee. Is that good for now? Anybody else want to serve?
Your vice chair?
Commissioner Brock's vice chair. With that, I think we've filled our committees. Is there any other?
Yeah.
The human,
I just wanted, can we just maybe for the record, so these are all of the committees that exist, because I do recall when we had a past chair, McGowan, you might remember this. He did form a committee that was more focused on the ability of the housing authority to go in and investigate slum. And of course, unless somebody dispenses with that committee's still there.
Oh, I did not realize this.
Yeah, so do we want to, and I know Dwayne was working on a policy, so I just, and we don't have to, there may be other committees out there, but if we could just state
Well-
for the record, these are the only ones that you're interested in?
So I feel like that we kind of pulled that policy together through governance, which was the policy. And my opinion would be, if we're going to take action as a board on something like that, I would hope that would come from the full board, before the full board, with a recommendation through Mr. Alexander, because my recollection is usually these things move quickly and we have to act quickly. So I'm afraid that trying to go through, get a committee recommendation and turn around and do a full board meeting might be problematic. For the commissioners that just joined us, we've been utilizing our investigatory power and threatening with our subpoena power certain landlords that have not taken care of their properties, and we found it to be something that needs to be acted on relatively quickly. So hence my recommendation. Commissioner Brock, any point?
I was gonna wait for you to finish, because I wanted to ask you about another committee that we have.
Okay, let's deal with this one. Does anybody see a need to continue this investigatory committee per se? Okay, so I will forego making any appointments to that committee, and I think that was an ad hoc,
Yeah.
so it's dissolved, it's dispensed with. Commissioner Brock, you said there was another committee you were worried or thought there might be?
Yeah, you had appointed, Ms. Phillips, I know she's no longer with us, but she was over, human resource.
So-
So are we still gonna do that one?
That was an ad hoc, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we'll, unless somebody feels the need, at this point, to my knowledge, there's not a HR matter that we need to deal with. We can dispense with it, or we could appoint it so we have it if we need it. Commissioner Shube, then Commissioner Brock?
I would think it would go into your operational committee. If there's a need for an HR matter, that operational committee could address it if needed. I don't think there's a need for an additional just HR committee, especially, to me, a lot of we're talking about getting into what's going on in the authority. A specific HR committee would, to us, we're the HR for Mr. Alexander. He's the HR for the staff, so
That's a great point.
that's where I'm at.
Commissioner Brock?
Again, I have to go back to the conference, because these are things that they talked about in the conference, that we as commissioners, not that we're doing the daily operation, but we should be abreast to what's going on here at the Housing Authority. For instance, they gave us some examples at the conference. They said, we should know how many people are fired, how many people are resigning, how many staff people we're short of that may not, be able to make the Housing Authority flow like it needs to flow. And so that was the reason. Then we had talked about at our retreat about a 360 evaluation. And so we as a board, what I would love to see us as a board, I would love to see us doing the things that we do come up with and we do say that we're gonna do. And again, like I say, I'll refer to our attorney, if I'm misleading this conversation, can you, because I wanna stay in right posture with, as a commissioner.
So,
Hold on, though.
Commissioner Shoup.
Yeah, I'm not saying we shouldn't look at it and get into it. I'm just saying that committee is covered by this operational committee. That is all. Not saying, I just think we don't need a separate committee just for employee human resources things. I think it's just, that's something that covers in the operational reviews and such. That's all.
And the vacant positions are in the operations report, aren't they?
Correct.
I believe I saw them there. I think they're in this report.
So again, I think, Commissioner Brock, your point is very well taken, and I think my recommendation or direction, Mr. Alexander, for the Asset Management Committee will be to have an HR component to it, where the HR report is reviewed as well to ensure that we're up to speed. Ms. Brock, you're on the operations team, correct? Mr. Alexander.
So if you look at the operations report, inside the operations report, a report is typically 40 to 50 pages long. It's usually about at least a 5-page or a 4-page report on everything that happens in HR.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, it's on page 25.
And I think that's, again, through the Asset Management / Operations Committee, that is something that can be driven in detail.
Yeah.
But your point is well taken. At the conference, they were very articulate on that point, so. So just for the formal record, I'd like to state that to the extent there were prior committees established ad hoc that have not been staffed or appointed to today, they are being dissolved. And Ms. Hodges and Mr. Alexander, the committees established today and staff today will be the only standing / ad hoc committees we have. Any other questions? Okay, now, if we can move back to number 3 on our agenda, we have the meeting minutes from the last board meeting. They were in your board packet that was circulated to you. I did have a chance to review those minutes. They looked, as always with our court reporter, on point, which I sincerely appreciate. So, can I get a motion to approve the prior meeting minutes? I have a motion from Commissioner Brock. Do I have a second?
A second.
I have a second, Commissioner Horowitz. All those or any discussion, excuse me. I'm going to butcher it for a year, just to be clear. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the meeting minutes from December 1st, 2022, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion carries. Next, Mr. Lohr, if you wouldn't mind giving us the financial presentation and overview, would be much appreciated.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. We are looking at our financials today as of December 31st, 2022. For our JHA properties, this is our first 3 months or our first quarter of the year. And for our RAD properties, this is the 12/31 year end, so it represents a full year of operations. Looking at our total income by source, for the JHA properties, we're at $1,968,757 of net income for the quarter. And for our RAD properties, we're at $594,911 for the year. Looking at our central office, we're at about 23% for our income currently, $1,620,961 for the quarter. And we're at about 17% for our expenses, so we're doing really well on our expenses, $1,295,356. And for the central office, we have a net operating income of $325,605. Looking at our public housing for the first quarter, we're right on track with our percentage. And we're at $4,095,931 for our income. For our expenses, we're about 3% below budget at $3,383,648. We have a net operating income of $712,282. For our Section 8 operations, our income is at 36%, so we're doing really well with our income. $2,556,787 for the quarter. And for our expenses, we're right on track, 25.4%, $2,072,392, and our net operating income is $484,395. And then for our Gregory West property, we're about 1% below our revenues at $644,148. Our expenses are right on track though at $315,083. So our net operating income is $329,065. And then for Brentwood Park, we're just over 1% above budget at $679,003. And our expenses are about 3% below budget at $560,427, which gives us a net operating income of $118,575. Looking at our reserves, we ended the month at just under $56 million for reserves. So we're doing excellent with our reserve funding. And then every month we look at our quick ratio and our MENAR. HUD likes us to be at 4. 4 is a good number for them. For our quick ratio, our lowest number is 7, so we're way above 4, so that's a really good thing. Our two best properties are at 24 and 25, so we're doing great there. And then our MENAR, again, HUD is looking for us to be at 4. Our lowest property is at 5.76, so we're doing excellent on our ratios. And then looking at our RAD properties, starting with the waves, we're at 111% for our income, $1,772,360. So we had a great year at the waves. And for our income for our expenses at the waves, we're at 109%. $785,752, which gives us net operating income of $986,609. Looking at Centennial Towers, this is our second RAD property that we closed on. We're at 102% for our income. We're at $1,709,513. And for our expenses, we're at 93%, so we did really well there. $1,285,239, and our net operating income is $424,273. And then finally at Hogan Creek, our income for the year is at 76%, $1,297,087. The trend over the last couple of months, though, has been really good. We're at month over month, we're right on budget now that the construction is completed. And then for our expenses, we're doing very well there as well. We're at 87%, $1,143,139. Any questions?
Mr. Laura, do you have the full agency balance sheet available on these slides by chance?
I can Put it on the slide.
Could you put it on the slide, so we have it for later? Would you be able to do that?
Later today?
Yes, could you pull that down so we have it? That would be great, because I think it'll be informative for the other conversations we're probably going to have. Other than that, I have no questions. Any commissioners, any questions?
I just have a question, just to get opinion from the rest of the board. The slides that we just walked through, and thank you for all that work, Dennis. For me, looking at variances, it's helpful in my experience that we're looking at year-over-year variances, and we're also looking at variance to plan or budget. So for me, it would be more productive if we were looking at slides that showed that, so we could actually be addressing issues as far as increasing expenses and having a conversation that would be a little more productive. But I just wanted to make sure that the rest of the team agrees with that before we move to make any change to what we're seeing in this meeting.
Commissioner Griggs?
I was just going to add something similar, but it was more of a procedural piece, and I know that the Finance Committee meets prior to and they review this report, correct? And, but I noticed that the finance report that you all review is not in the board packet that we received. So that would be helpful to me, because that's the first thing I look for, because I know that the resolutions come hot and heavy, you know. But if you all have completed that, and I have all the confidence in the Finance Committee, they do the heavy lifting for us. But if I had that, you know, the finance report in that board packet, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think one of the things I would want to task the Finance Committee with is, one of the things I've been looking at is, that there's no necessarily right or wrong way to review financials, but one of the things I think I'd like to do is maybe revamp some of the way we look at financials. And that'll go through the Finance Committee, you know, working with Mr. Alexander and Mr. Lohr to structure maybe a more, what I say is a more traditional view of a financial overview. Because much like Mr. Riggs, I end up having to go into the financials and dig. I think these are all salient points, which we'll find out in the Operations Asset Management Committee as to why they're important. But I would task the Finance Committee with maybe creating and adding a few slides that give us a better overview of things, should they see fit.
I agree. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the finances? Mr. Lohr, if I could if you wouldn't mind grabbing that, even if you could just be able to rattle it off, that'd be great, for the balance sheet.
Is there a specific program?
No, I want total agency balance sheet year-to-date, including unrestricted funds. Thank you. Hearing no questions, we have a bunch of resolutions for board action. Normally, I would do these via en banc, but I don't think we're going to have that luxury today, via consent. So we will take these one by one today to get through them. Commissioner Green, I understand that Mr. Alexander made me aware immediately prior to the meeting that the budgets that you've reviewed, but you wanted to have some conversations about them.
No,
Is that
just really the one, it was Hogan Creek.
just Hogan Creek?
Yep.
Okay, well, then I'll hold that
I had questions there as well.
at Hogan Creek. Okay, so let me hold that one. At this, Commissioner Brock?
I had one about the lawn service.
About the lawn service? Okay, we'll hold the lawn service. I'm also going to hold JHA 2023, Resolution 3 and 4. It's just going to be easier. We're just going to go through these one by one. It's going to be easier than trying to do this in a combined motion. Okay, so at this point, I'm looking at resolution number 2023 RAD 1, operating budgets for the Wave of Jacksonville fiscal year 2023. Can I get a motion to approve in a second so we can enter into discussion, please? I have a motion. I have a second from Commissioner Brock. At this time, I'll open it for discussion. Mr. Alexander or Mr. Green, would you guys mind giving us a quick overview? Based on what I've read, this is just our standard yearly budget for the Waves.
Yes. You want to go, Commissioner
You
Green?
can go.
Okay, yeah, so, basically is our annual, budget, for the Waves. Actually, the Waves and Centennial had eclipsed a year on these properties, and all these RAD properties, it's a little bit different than our, public housing properties. And some of the things that we highlighted in there was the income based on, OCAP, which is the operating cost adjustment factor, which is 1.6%. And also some of the expenses are based on the actual contracts and trends. And then we had a summary, like you include in the Waves, first RAD conversion, the property is stable, and we are not budgeting for anything unusual, and the net income before depreciation is $747,705. The Centennial Towers was our second RAD conversion and was completed in 2022. The expenses have been adjusted to reflect the end of the construction, and the net income before depreciation is $648,563.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Let's talk waves first, if we can. So Resolution 2023 RAD 1. I have a motion, I have a second, and we're in discussion. Are there any specific questions on the waves operating budget? Mr. Green, I presume that the Finance Committee reviewed this prior to it coming to the board?
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, the waves is what, 100% or 99% occupied, right?
Yeah, our whole portfolio, public housing in our RAD properties is 99.66% occupied. So, yes, I believe that property is either 99% or 100% occupied, as most of all our properties, our whole entire portfolio.
In my understanding, because, government housing or Section 8 housing, it's pretty easy to, not easy, but it's easier to budget for because you know what you have coming in. So I had really no problems with any of them, but just wanted them to explain Hogan Creek.
Okay. And Mr. Alexander, the only question, and again, not to, I guess, any other commissioners, Commissioner Grigg first. I should go last.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just was curious of how it stacked up against the previous year's budget. Were there any discrepancies?
I did not ask that question in the meeting, but I'm sure when Dennis comes back, he can answer that.
Any discrepancies, anything popped out? Outliers? It might have been helpful as part of the budget to have, maybe the previous 2 years lines there.
Mr. Alexander, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Commissioner Brock.
I'm sorry, Mr.
No, you're
Chair,
fine.
Forgive me. Through Mr. Chair, I don't think the Waves was a RAD property 2 years ago.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, there was a RAD property. And to respond to your question, nothing popped out to me when I actually looked at the budget based on year to year. The RAD property seems a little stable, more so than our other properties, because just about everything in the property is brand new. And then the ones at the RAD, at the Waves are brand new buildings for the most part.
I guess, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner.
Are there any significant increases in expenses at all, or any significant decreases in, just, again, it would be helpful just to be, to see what the line was last year
Okay,
versus this year.
okay.
Commissioner?
I would just say if we're looking at that in the future, I'd rather see actuals compared to what we're budgeting for the year versus the budget. The budget from last year could have gone up, down, whatever, but the actuals versus what we're budgeting, actuals of what happened versus the budget, to me, would be extremely helpful.
Mr. Lohr's back in the room. Mr. Lohr, there was a question posed by Commissioner Griggs and I think others relative to the year-to-year. Are you aware of any significant variances between last year's budget and this year's budget? And if so, what would it be for the Waves?
So for the waves, there are no significant changes. The budget is based on actuals.
The budget is based on actuals?
Yes.
Okay. And questions, other commissioners, before I start? My questions go back to the refuse service. I presume that this is bid every year and this is the best we can get, correct?
Yes,
Okay, because that one hurts. And then also insurance, I assume it is what it is with the insurance. There's no way to mitigate that any further? Okay. Is there any other discussion or comment? So there's a motion on the table approved. It has been seconded. Hearing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving resolution number 2023 RAD-1 which is the budget for the waves, which includes, thank you, Mr. Alexander, the budget attached to the resolution, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, that resolution passes. Thank you. Next on the list, resolution number 2023 RAD 2, operating budget for Centennial Towers fiscal year. Can I get a motion and a second to open discussion, please? I have a motion to approve the resolution. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second, Commissioner Brock. At this time, we'll open up for discussion. Mr. Green, would you mind giving us your quick rundown on this one? It was reviewed by Finance.
Yes, I mean, it's similar to the waves. You have, some non-cash deductions, but basically it's 648,000 of net operating income. I didn't ask to compare last year's numbers versus this year's, but it seems like the property is producing, and Dennis can share or come on top of that as well.
Mr. Lord?
Yes, again, the budget is based on the actuals for the year. We looked at our payroll budget. For our payroll, it's based on the exact people who are working at the property. For maintenance contracts, lawn care, pest control, elevator maintenance, trash, that's all based on the actuals.
Commissioners, Commissioner Griggs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just gonna, do you have a number, total income number, revenue number for 2022 for Centennial?
It is in our financial statement. So the total income for 2022 was $1,709,513.
And so the total income for this budget is $1,772,500.
Yes. Yes, there is an increase in tenant assistance payments on the income side. This is through the OCAF, which is the operational cost adjustment factor through HUD, and it came in at 6.1% this year. So the rents are naturally increasing because this is a project-based voucher property.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions?
I have no questions. I attended the finance meeting. Just a comment. I think that this is a really good discussion around what kinds of things we want to see that are going to help us have more robust conversation. And maybe as you have thoughts, you can share them with Mr. Alexander, of the kinds of slides or data you would help us have a more productive meeting. I think year-over-year variances are important so we can see what our trends are. I'd like to see some forecasting and reforecasting, but that's just my preference. So if you have preference, if you could share them, we could start to incorporate them.
Thank you, Commissioner. Another thing that I saw more so on this budget than the last budget, although I believe it was just as tough, is, correct me if I'm wrong, we do not do any, on this property specifically for Centennial, there are no utility billbacks here, correct? We are responsible for utilities on this property? Is that a true statement? Based on this budget? Or is the utility income inclusive of the tenant assistance payments? Does this question make sense? What I'm getting at is I see a $114,000 line item for electricity, and I'm wondering whether or not the assistant payments include an amount that's set aside to offset utilities, or is that, which basically means we're offsetting the electricity cost, right? Versus we eat the electricity cost, because if we're eating the electricity cost, I would then be asking, are we looking at, solar or other things kind of along with our rubric to begin mitigating and offset that? And that may be a question for the asset team, the asset report, or the asset committee to look at, but it is a question that I think we should dive into a little bit this year. But that was my only comment on this budget. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving resolution number 2023 RAD 2, which is the Centennial Towers operating budget for 2023, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, that resolution passes. Next resolution on the list is resolution number 2023-RAD-3, which is the operating budget for Hogan Creek. If I could get a motion to approve in a second so we can enter discussions, I would entertain it. I have a motion. I have a second from Commissioner Brock. I think I saw you raise your hand out of the corner of my eye. Thank you, Commissioner. I'll go ahead and open it up for discussion. Commissioner Green?
Dennis can just go over the budget for the board, and we can ask our questions from there.
Yeah, it's gonna be the same as our other properties. We have the OCAF, 6.1%, adding into our income, so our total income is budgeted at $1,666,060. We have our administrative salaries, they're based on the actual employees that work at the property. Staff training audit fees is based on the contract. We have a management fee, which is based on 5% of the rental income. Security service is a big number here, and it's based on the actual weekly contract for security. Tenant services is based on our payroll budget. Water, electricity, gas, and sewer are all based on our current utility bills. Maintenance salaries is from our payroll budget. Our maintenance materials, that's all items that our maintenance employees use to keep up with the property. And then for our contracts, things like pest control, grounds, HVAC, elevator monitoring, those are all contracts. So it's based on our contracts. The big thing that we were looking at in the meeting is that depreciation is included in here. Depreciation is a non-cash item, so when you take the depreciation out, it does have positive cash flow. And this budget also includes the interest expense.
Any questions on this budget?
And I did ask them with the negative income, net income, we don't get dinged on our audit. So that's,
Okay. Commissioner Griggs?
Thank you. I think we talked about this a little bit before, if I'm not mistaken, but the utilities costs, I think there's been some type of forecast that, you know, utility bills are going to go up here in the future. Do we have a plan where that amount is, you know, sort of locked in, the current amount we used, if we base it on last year's or current amounts?
At Hogan Creek, what I'm noticing is that with the new appliances and new windows is that the utility costs are actually coming down, especially for electricity.
Okay.
So I would think that higher rates would be offset by the savings that we are experiencing now with usage.
Thank you. Can we keep an eye on that? Because I think that would be good information for us to have going forward, especially when we're looking at making improvements to other facilities, how we actually save money by investing. Thank you.
Commissioner Shoup, did you have any comments?
I'm good.
Thank you. I would also go back again in connection with our scoring rubric with our acquisition group. I think it's important, and I know, Mr. Alexander, we did the physical needs studies, and we have a lot of reserves and a lot of properties looking at that energy, water, environmental efficiencies, because I do think, you know, to Mr. Griggs and frankly to Mr. Lohr's point, we're going to continue to see increases. So whatever we can do to offset that, low flow toilet, showers, and things like that. But I think that's on our plan.
Yeah, most of the stuff we use everything we use is energy efficient.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any further discussion on resolution number 2023 RAD-3? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of resolution number 2023 RAD-3, which is the operating budget for Hogan Creek fiscal year 2023, signify by saying aye.
aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the resolution passes. Next, we have two resolutions, our first two resolutions of the year. First one is resolution number 2023 JHA 1, which is for total, I think that's to say lawn, not law care. I would be very upset if we had to hire more lawyers. Speaking as a lawyer, I might add. But I believe it's for the lawn care contract. Can I get a motion and a second so we can enter into discussion, please? I have a motion from Commissioner Griggs to approve. Commissioner Brock? I have a second from Commissioner Brock. I'll open it up for discussion. First questions, Mr. Green, I presume that this contract modification was reviewed at the Finance Committee, or Mr. Horowitz, sorry, I guess you were now technically the chair, but he was then.
Yes, it was. It was reviewed, but there was a question regarding the calculation of the total. Wanted to know if it is an increase of, what was it, 473, or if it's more than that.
Mr. Alexander?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, we actually went back and realized there was a mistake on the document, and it was, instead of 68,000, it was only 24,000 that increased that the vendor was asking for, and it was basically associated with labor, fuel, and equipment. And when we factor in the $24,099.48, it actually came out to them charging us an additional $41.72 per cut. We have 16 sites where we get 3 cuts a month, and it actually cost us, the $24,000 came up to about $41, almost $42. So we thought it was justifiable. It was only $24,000. We thought it was justifiable because of the cost in gasoline and equipment and labor costs.
Okay. Mr. Alexander, excuse my ignorance, is this a competitively bid contract?
Yes, it is.
And procurement, we have no need to rebid any of this for any reason? No? Okay,
If
great.
I
Commissioner?
just on that comment, we had discussion around this, and just to add a little color, Mr. Alexander shared that this vendor is a real partner for the Housing Authority, which I think is fantastic and employs a number of residents. But I had the same thought, that we do need to be putting contracts out to bid when we're seeing an increase. And I asked to see the procurement policy. I didn't see if there's any note on if rates are increased a certain number of times. I think that maybe we should consider, if there's a price increase, maybe 2-3 years consecutively, that we should put it out to bid. We just need to make sure that we're not a price taker in a competitive industry.
Commissioner?
What happens if we say no on this? Are they going to cut us off? Or, I mean, if they're under contract, shouldn't they be fulfilling their contract to the end of the term?
We have never had a situation like that, and typically, the pandemic was unprecedented. We haven't had a situation like that before. We know that the labor costs became very expensive, and getting services became very expensive because of COVID, and we actually received several $1 million from the federal government. So we thought, when they came in to present us the situation to us, that $24,000 was reasonable. But we never really ever get these type of situations. First time it has ever happened since I've been here. And it made good logical sense because of the pandemic. And we felt as though when you price it out to $42 a cut, and the cost of getting a reliable vendor now and then to be able to maintain a curb appeal, it was important that we maintain a relationship with them. And as Commissioner Horowitz was saying a little bit earlier, or mentioned, this vendor has been one of our most prominent vendors that we have. They show up for every one of our Section 3 event. They have several of our residents working for them. And anytime you call upon them for any assistance in terms of showing up for a job fair, they're very active out there. So they're just not some of the bad vendors that we experienced and had to let go.
Through the chair, when does the contract expire?
It started in 2019, and it comes up, it renews itself every year. We bring it back to the board every year to renew the contract.
So it would, through the chair, it would have just come up this past October,
Yes.
and they didn't say anything in October when it was time to renew, and now they're 2 months later wanting to say something.
Yeah. And the numbers that they actually bidded, that they gave us, was pre-pandemic, because the contract went out in 2019. So for some of the vendors, we was bracing because we knew that cost was changing.
Right, but through the chair, they would have had to, if the contract it renews every year, so October of '21, they should have provided any new pricing for the new year of the contract. Did we execute a new contract with them in October this year?
Yes,
And they didn't want to change the pricing at that point? They come to us in 2 months later wanting to change the price?
yes, that's correct.
I'll say through to the chair, this doesn't sit well with me.
Commissioner Brock?
And, Mr. Chair, that was gonna be my argument. That's why I said I had some questions for it until Mr. Alexander broke it down like he did. That's what I couldn't understand that. Why did they not say nothing in October when we did their contract?
Other comments from the commissioners?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Griggs?
I'm just going to say that I do think that the board, from time to time, needs to get closer to the procurement process, because this is, sometimes it can be, relational, and I understand that they're doing good work with the organization, but that may have, probably falsely made them feel like they could, from October to now, fix their business situation, which from our perspective as a, oversight process is not the case. And I hope that we're not misinterpreting their intentions, but it just seems like oversight on their behalf that they want us to correct for them.
Commissioner?
Through the chair, I think this also opens up a bad precedent for any other vendor we have that, our budget has changed, I know we just renewed our contract, but our things have changed and things are more expensive now, and I'm sorry, I believe they would have known what their expenses were at the end of September. I don't think they've changed that much between then and now. I think this opens up a bad precedent.
Mr. Alexander, or to procurement, when we say that it's renewed annually, do we have a 5-year contract that automatically renews, or do we bid this every year?
No, we have, we sign up to a 1-year contract, and we renew it every year up to 4 additional years.
Up to 4 additional years?
Yes.
Okay,
Based on performance.
based on performance. So there was an award, technically speaking, under procurement, there would have been an award for up to 5 years, reviewed and assessed annually.
No, we don't do 5-year contracts. We only do a 1-year contract, renewable every year.
Sorry, for clarification, meaning for procurement purposes, we said it's a year-to-year contract, but absent us not reviewing, we can keep it going for up to 5 years. In other words, we're not going to go through the procurement process bidding again for up to 5 years.
No. We actually sign you to a contract,
Yep,
and if we decide to renew it, we'll renew it next year. If we decide not to renew it the following year, then we won't renew it the following year, then we go back out for a bid.
so when we don't renew it, if we don't renew it, that is when we go back out for bid?
Yes.
Okay.
And through the chair,
Commissioner
Dwayne,
Green.
and how did they approach saying that they needed to increase their costs?
They spoke to procurement, and then I think they spoke to the director of maintenance, and they spoke to procurement, and then they brung the young man to my office, and we spoke, and then we went back, looked at the numbers and reviewed the numbers, and then we presented to the board.
Okay, and you think it's fair, the
Yes.
increase? Gotcha.
So your recommendation is that we change their contract?
Well, my recommendation is that we pay the additional $24,000.
And that's based on the amount of money that it's the cost of doing business for them, or the amount of money, or just because they've been doing a great job?
Well, no, it's because I understand the economy, and I understand that the cost of doing business in general has escalated. As I mentioned earlier, with the rising cost of gasoline and the cost of equipment, so the expenses out there that requires a little additional more money.
And when do they need an answer by?
As soon as the board approval, we let them know.
Well,
Commissioner, Commissioner Shoup, sorry, one second, Commissioner Green.
I just want to say, I don't disagree that costs have gone up and everything. It's that they didn't come when we informed them we're intending to renew the contract, they didn't say anything then. That they don't want to accept the renewed contract, because they could always decide, no, I don't want to take the renewed contract. That's where I have a problem with this. And they coming a couple months later saying, hey, we want another 24,000. I'm assuming that's spread out amongst, or are they wanting a one-time lump sum payment?
No, not a one lump sum payment. As I mentioned, it averaged out to about
Right.
$42 per cut.
So like I said, I don't disagree that the price is not a good price. It's just, I don't like it coming afterwards, after everybody's executed the new agreement.
So where I see this, Mr. Alexander, is one of two things. We can vote the resolution, in which case I wonder whether or not it would pass at this point. Or we could have the motion withdrawn, send this back to committee, and have another conversation with this group to say, are you sure this is what you want us to vote on? Because I do think Mr. Shoup raises a very valid point, that, you know, we were just here. And I think it would be worthwhile that if, you know, somebody wants to have this kind of an increase, albeit in the grand scheme of things, it's what, 10% would be 40, it's a 5% increase to the effective contract, roughly. Is that a rough math? You know, maybe we need to have them in to speak to the finance committee, so there's some understanding there. But if this were to be voted upon, I would be a no at this point in time.
That's fine.
I think at this point, we should also get another quote, just so we can compare.
I think if we go through another quote, we'd have to run procurement, correct? I would say, to that point, Commissioner, if they're willing to stay with the existing contract, and understanding the relationship and understanding there's an opportunity to do this the right way next year, we can continue on. But if they're going to continue to push this and say we have to have it, I think it begs the question for this board to consider whether or not we direct a full procurement process. So, Mr. Alexander, I'll let you kind of give us some guidance. Would you prefer we formally vote down the resolution or merely have it referred back to committee for further consideration?
You can refer it back to the committee.
Great. Can I have a withdrawal of the motion, Mr. Griggs?
Yes.
Okay.
Withdraw my motion.
So I have a motion that's been withdrawn, and I believe under my purview, Ms. Hodges, I can direct this back for committee for further consideration? Or do I need to vote on that?
Yeah, I give a motion in a second already, and it's before really,
Well, we withdrew the motion.
Yeah, as you said.
Oh, you can't?
you already have a second.
Okay.
So technically, speaking, you kind of got to go through. What I would do is postpone it here,
Great.
and I do think you can go ahead and have your finance committee review it again.
Fantastic. So I believe if I could get a motion to postpone in a second, which requires a majority, I believe that's true. Okay. If I could get a motion to postpone consideration of the motion pending for approval, I would entertain that motion.
So moved.
I have a motion to postpone the current motion pending, which is approval of resolution number 2023 JHA1. Can I have a second? I have a second from Commissioner Brock. Is there any further discussion on the motion to postpone? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? The motion carries. The motion to approve resolution number 2023 JHA1 is postponed. And Mr. Alexander, if you could go back to Finance Committee, it'd be much appreciated.
Mr. Chair, I just bring up for a point for the finance to discuss. I'm looking at the landscape management agreement that was attached to this resolution. It's dated 12/12 for 30 days. That's, I thought we're supposed to be doing this in October. So they didn't even submit their stuff till 2 months later.
So the
that's-
Finance Committee could take a look at the timing of the renewal. That'd be appreciated, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner. The next resolution that I have in front of me is resolution number 2023 JHA 2, which is regarding the Victory Point roof replacement for Lewis Walker Roofing. If I could get a motion to approve and a second, so we can open discussion, please. I have a motion to approve and a second. At this time, I'll entertain discussion on the motion. Mr. Green, was this one reviewed at Finance Committee?
Yes.
And based on the attachment, it looks like there was a procurement and a bid tabulation sheet?
And, yes, and they had 3 bids, and they chose Victory Point, or, Lewis Walker Roofing.
Okay. Commissioners, is there any discussion on this motion, or, excuse me, this resolution? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving resolution number 2023 JHA2 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, the resolution carries. At this point, I'm going to put us into a short 5-minute recess, as I'm sure the next 2 topics could prolong conversation. So I will call us in recess for the next 5 minutes. Thank you. Time to play. Time to play. Oh, okay. Oh, goodness gracious. Let's see what time we finish. I think we're missing one or two.
Commissioner Brock, she's watching it now. She hadn't seen the video.
Oh, she hadn't seen it? Oh, my God.
Can I show you? It's not
It's from the conference. You
it's
missed
from the
out on it.
conference?
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you, Mr. Alexander. Mr. Alexander. Mr. Alexander. That's amazing. That's the best part. That's amazing.
Oh,
so good.
we'll give them one more minute here.
All right, 5 minutes.
It's gone. It's gone. I say it's over.
Okay, yes, it is. I'm going to call the meeting back to order, but I know some folks are still wrapping up some things, so we're going to call it back to order so we can keep the business moving along. And obviously, I want to be respectful of our commissioners who may want to comment as well. So before us, we have the next two resolutions, which we'll take separately. But first, resolution JHA 2023 JHA 3, which is the approval of the Chase Properties acquisition, and resolution 23 JHA 4, which is the approval of the JWB Real Estate Capital acquisition. One, I want to thank the acquisition committee for the time in going through these. I realize they were no small task, especially putting this all together and really trying to understand where we fit in this process. So with that, I think what I'd like to do is have a motion to approve the Chase Properties acquisition and a second so we can enter into discussion. Is that correct, Ms. Hodges? Thank you.
Both of them?
Just the first one.
Oh.
I want to take them one by one.
Make a motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion to approve resolution JHA 3 and a second. At this point, I'll open it up for discussion. Mr. Alexander, do you want to give a quick overview
Yeah,
of this transaction?
I actually had a PowerPoint presentation again.
Oh, great. Would you mind?
Yes, sir.
If you wouldn't mind just limiting it on this one to Chase Properties, the Normandy,
Okay.
and then we'll do the rest of it. Is it on both or just the one?
It's on both of them. I'll try to limit it to the one.
You've sat here this long, Mr. Alexander.
And I hope you get a better understanding of this. I may have to go all the way. Okay, here we go. So the Normandy project overview, Chase Property is the lead developer on 102 unit affordable housing, 20% affordable and 80% market rate. Deal includes 9.04 total acres with plus or minus 10.5 upland development acres. The developer is seeking 2.3, $2,376,000 from JHA to secure the purchase of the land. JHA will own and manage the property upon completion. This is nearly a shovel-ready project for JHA. The PSA is executed, all entitlement currently is in place, all permitting should be completed by February 1st. Engineering and process based on the unit mix and JHA needs vertical design and completed. Is this the one with, oh, so here's the location right here. It's right there at Normandy and Nathan Hill Road. And this is the property right here. And right here is the phase one from another property that's completed. And behind that, a developer is starting on phase two. We think that property right there, the potential development of these 102 units would be a great place for us. And that's sort of a rendering of their property. The mix for that property, but I sort of grouped these in together.
That's
So
no
it's
worry.
hard to do one,
Go ahead, Mr. Alexander. Yeah,
so I might as well go back.
might as well go back and do that one as well. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So good afternoon, everyone.
It's like Groundhog Day.
Yes, so JBW project, JBW Real Estate Capital, JBW would develop up to 50 infill homes for JJ. Phase 1, zip codes and units count for 50 homes. There are 2 bedrooms, three buildings, two bedrooms, 3. 3 bedrooms is 25 and 4 bedrooms is 22. JJ will purchase a finished property from JBW at a discount market rate. JBW acts as a developer to find, underwrite, acquire lots and build houses. JJ will have the equity in the properties, building a strong balance sheet.
Sorry it doesn't matter that we're not saying JWB for the record?
No, I think the resolution has JWB. Let me make sure. Yes, it does. JWB.
Good. So, when you look at the maps, be 15 properties in 09, 14 and 21, 08 has 7, 18 has 5, 10 has 3, 05 has 2, 19 has 2, and 20 has 2. And I have a printout, so I'll pass out to you guys. Well, I don't have enough of them. But when you look at the zip codes, where we currently have properties at, this is a good fit for us. When you take the 09, in the 09 zip code, we have about 1,000 units there, so most of these are all brand-new townhomes. Folks will want to live in that area. When you look at 21, we only have 70 vouchers in that area, 70, which only represent 0.09. So that's a good place to put those 14 units. And then it works its way on down, and you get down to maybe, if you take 18, we only have 400 vouchers in that specific area. So I think that we thought this was a great mix based on our current vouchers. I talked about the Normandy project and where's that location at, the Normandy townhomes, the rendering of the property. So financial assumptions. The JWB home deal is $11,500,000 or $230,000 per home. The Normandy deal costs about $33,000. JJ, we will leverage A+ credit and issue of revenue bonds on these properties. The revenue bonds will fund the total development cost for both projects. The revenue bonds interest only, 10 to 15-year tenant bullet payment. JJ will use unrestricted funds, cash, for the following. JBW Homes, $7 million for the purchase of 30 homes. Normandy Townhomes, $2.3 million, or $2,376,000 for the purchase of the land, and including the PSA, and Normandy Townhomes, $500,000 for the escrow deposit. The total initial unrestricted funds used will be $9.5 million. Proceeds from the revenue bonds will refund the cash and the outlay in 90 days or less. Typically, when you come out with these revenue bonds, coming out the gate, it may take about 45 to 60 days at the beginning, but after that, we can usually probably turn around in 30 days. And there's some alternative financing. And I'm not gonna go into all that, but basically, if we wanted to take a small loan out, just pay the $9 million versus using the unrestricted cash, we can do that. More so like open up a line of credit. Just if we wanted to bring our cash back real quick. we don't have to do that. We can put our money out there, put the $9 million out there. Either way, we get the money back within 45 to 60 days. So, that's the PowerPoint.
Okay, so the, the resolution that's open before us is
Yes.
with respect to the Chase Properties acquisition.
Yes.
Let's start there. So, first things first, this did go through Acquisitions Committee. It was debated, questioned. I think we got answers. Ultimately, it came out of the Acquisition Committee with the recommendation to proceed. Where we stand with this one is, my understanding is Mr. Alexander, and I'll say it again to the full board, we were tasked with, if I learn one thing from FADA, it's policy, not operations, which I'm gonna try really hard this year not to go there. From a policy standpoint, Mr. Alexander, it appears that this deal has checked the boxes.
That's
It
correct.
appears to me that you have financing and/or ways that you plan to build this. It appears to me that, correct me if I'm wrong, when you say we're buying it, meaning we're, for lack of a better phrase, taking by assignment the purchase and sale agreement. They have no further rights except to help us develop it, and that's the end of it,
That's
which will be
correct.
documented. And in your view, this deal furthers the goals of this agency in creating affordable housing units, which we have tasked you with to complete.
Without a doubt, yes, sir.
Okay. With that premise, I will open it up for further discussion or questions from the group. And by the way, I forgot, Mr. Wilson is here from Piper Sandler, who came down because in large part, this deal in particular, correct me if I'm wrong, will be the only way we can get this done truly is if we go through the public finance process to then basically get the money to construct the project, which I think Mr. Wilson is here to make sure that if there are questions around that, we can have it addressed, because that is we're buying raw land here, nothing existing. So with that, is there discussion or questions from the group? Commissioner Griggs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Alexander, and everyone who was involved in this process. It does seem to be a fairly aggressive timeline for all of this. So someone help me to understand, how, this is going, people are gonna be able to move in here in the next few months or whatever. That's what we're saying?
So my understanding, and I don't think we have anybody from Chase Properties here, but my understanding, Commissioner Griggs, is from the prior presentation, Mr. Alexander, correct me if I'm wrong, we are acquiring the property, entitlements, permits, shovel-ready. It's then a question of, and this may be more towards Mr. Wilson, how fast can we go put together a financing option to actually do the ground-up vertical construction? And then based on the representations from the last meeting, it's a 12 to 18-month construction process with another 4 to 6 months lease-up. But memory serves, you told me we already have vouchers there that need, actively searching vouchers
Yeah,
there, is that?
Yes, we have actively searching vouchers, one, and we do have a large waiting list.
In that zip. Mr. Green, sorry. Wait, Commissioner Griggs first to answer your question, then Commissioner Green.
Yeah, I was just, and so I think what I really would like for us to kind of establish is this is a way for us to be in the game to addressing overall affordable housing concerns. We're looking at 50 units here, right, total?
No, this is 102. This is
102,
yes,
right,
normally,
102.
yes.
And we know that our waiting list has significantly more than that. We're not going to, cure the problem with this project. But I think I'm more interested in what does this do for us to be a player in this affordable housing game, because I keep hearing conversations around the community that really don't involve the housing authority, and that's troublesome.
Yeah, okay, Commissioner Griggs, now me and you, yes, sir. Let me help address that.
Okay.
So I have had ad nauseum meetings where, notwithstanding the fact that there has been a lot of conversation, there is still no one that is willing to put their foot out and say, we're going to be the leader in addressing these issues. Notwithstanding the fact that I very much think it should be JHA that is the leader addressing these issues. To me, not only to your point, does this solve our problem? Absolutely not. It doesn't even begin to make a dent in the issues we have with affordable housing. What I think this does do, which Mr. Alexander is staking his reputation on it, is putting the Housing Authority in a position to say, we are taking the lead, we are doing something, and if you want to be involved in this, you need to come and work with us. Not, with due respect, having a roundtable conversation where everybody is jockeying for who's on first. And I think that if that's the message we intend to send, and I will say again, I am very much in favor of sending this message, but I also am very much inclined to, Mr. Alexander and to the operations team, once we send that message, we're it. And we had best be ready to deal with those opportunities and repercussions. Commissioner Green, I think, and then Commissioner Griggs, if any response.
But the Chase property deal is market rent. We're earmarking 20 units where we get vouchers, but the rest is market rent.
So to be clear, I think the 20 units are restricted at like a 30% or 50%. And then the market rate units, we could use vouchers to fill them, correct, Mr. Alexander?
We could. But as I said many times before in these meetings, the federal government is not putting adequate amount of money out there for low-income housing. And folks need to really understand that you cannot build affordable housing, low-income housing, and let's talk about this. When they talk about affordable housing, they don't include low-income housing. We have every bit of over 40,000 residents, of 40,000 people that we serve. The average income of the people that we serve is only $12,000. You can't live anywhere with that little bit of income. That's why we have to have subsidized and low-income housing. But folks talk about affordable housing, but they talk about 120% and 110%, and they forget about the folks that need housing at the 30% and the 40 and the 50%. We can't build that because to build a house in Jacksonville, it costs you $375,000. The federal government has a fair cloth rule in play that you cannot build any additional public housing with government money. So you have to be creative now and then. So to get the housing authority, we have put ourselves in position, one, to be able to issue bonds. So we have to build affordable housing or market rate housing and make the money here to be able to have the low income families here. So to get to Commissioner's point, yes, we're building market rate units. And we have to continue to build market rate units because that's the only way we can build some low income housing units. Because, hey, we have money, we have unrestricted funds, and then we have restricted funds. As you look at this Normandy deal and you look at this JWB deal, between the both of them, you're talking about $40 million. That would basically wipe out our reserves that we have on the restricted side. You can't get that much mileage out of that. So we have to be creative, and we have to find other ways of being able to do some develop or do some mixed income deals so that we can be able to build low-income housing.
And I will say, to this point, Commissioner Green, you reminded me, during the acquisition committee, we talked ad nauseum about the fact that
Right.
the money that would be generated from this from market rate tenants
Yes.
comes back to us.
Yes.
And we can choose then to deploy that in furtherance of more affordable units, rent subsidies, whatever.
Right.
But I think from a policy standpoint, what we talked about was the fact that, better us than them kind of situation, which is better us earning that money, which can then be redeployed for what we see fit than a market developer who will set aside potentially nothing.
And,
Commissioner?
I recall that we decided that market rate was actually 120 AMI in this case.
It is. I think under our enabling statutes, we can actually go up to, I think it's 140% AMI. But I think what we're saying in this situation is market rate is the term market rate here means somebody not under our affordability restrictions is what we're talking
Yeah,
about
I think
here.
that's the part that you don't like, right? Because that's what kind of made me question, like, we're not in the business of making market rate units. So market rate for our purposes is still medium income, which is consistent with our mission.
Correct. I mean, one of the things we looked at and talked about is, look, if we were going to go out, if I understand and actually I see Ms. Hodges on her phone, which I presume she's pulling up the statute. One of the things, I think if you look at our statute, it's not, the enabling statute does not say 20% AMI or 50% AMI. It gives you a broad breadth of where you can go. I think our conversation is focused on the fact that even though we have that broad breadth, if we wanted to go to 140% AMI, where we own a project and finance it, we don't have to. We can set whatever restrictions we want, which allows us to cap it at 100% AMI, 110% AMI, to capture some market rate tenants that may be the quote-unquote missing middle, which everyone keeps hearing about. But the reality is if I'm being pragmatic, we're doing it to be able to subsidize the 20 units, which otherwise you can't subsidize if you don't do it this way.
I agree. I
Yeah.
think maybe just a comment that we should stay away from the term market rate. 'Cause
I
think it's
agree.
confusing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Mr. Griggs, I look to you because I think you help me understand this better than anybody. Market rate has 1,000 different meanings. Affordable has 1,000 different meanings. I think we need to be clear that when we're talking affordable, or maybe we should start using, very low income, extremely low income, because that's what we're talking about. So from our perspective of quote unquote market, it just means we are not restricting them at 30% area median income and rents. I think that's the key definitional policy issue that we need to be, to your point, very careful of. These are not meant to be, nor will they ever be, Class A luxury units that rent out at $3,000 a month. That's never going to be the case. So, Commissioner, yes, sorry.
I just wanted to make sure that, that as because I have confidence in the recommendation from the acquisition committee, that this is a good project to proceed on. And I love Mr. Alexander's passion for this project. But I want to make sure that this community understands that, this is probably the solutions that we haven't seen anyone else step into related to how we, solve our affordable housing crisis. And what we're seeing here a lot with people outside of the housing authority's purview is that they are becoming occupation specific on what they consider to be affordable housing based upon, what your career is. And I think that we maybe want to keep that diversity in mind and not sort of lock ourselves into, types of specific industries that we're trying to attract to a specific area of town. So
I think it's a great point, Commissioner Griggs, because I think it goes back to, again, policy, right? We are not looking to create housing that caters towards due respect lawyers, right? But we may be looking to create housing that caters to a working single mom working 3 jobs or somebody of that nature. And I think it's important that the community understands that this is different. To my knowledge, this hasn't been done in Duval County before. I think it is something that if nothing else, we can put our foot forward and say, we're not just talking about it, we're going to do something. And I've said it before, if we're wrong, we need to own up that it didn't work. We need to figure that out. But doing something is better than doing nothing at all. And Mr. Griggs, I have to commend you. I've been pushing this for 18 months, and you've really made me think through how we handle this, and I sincerely appreciate that, working through the committee and coming up with the policy and how we're evaluating. And, Mr. Alexander, your fervor in pushing this forward has been nothing short of welcome and appreciated. So, any other comments? Commissioner Hodges. I feel like sometimes you are commissioners, Ms. Hodges, in a good way.
So just to answer your question, there is a reference about the projects may include non-residential uses and may use public and private funds to serve individuals or families who meet the applicable income requirements of the state or the federal program involved. That's one, whose income does not exceed 150% of the applicable median income for the area as established by HUD.
Yeah.
That's two. And then three, and who, in the determination of the housing authority, lacks sufficient income or assets to enable them to purchase or rent a decent, safe, and sanitary dwelling. Okay? So that third one is, gets
Pretty
to, I
broad.
think, the low income that Mr. Axon was talking about. But if there are no comments from the board, I do have a few legal comments to the resolution that I just offer for the board's consideration.
Ms. Hodges, if I could just, I will absolutely entertain those. I want to make sure that we have any open conversation with the board about this project in particular before we go into comments on the resolution. Commissioner?
I would just say, I know I'm the new guy, and I've talked way too much today for being a new guy. But in the face of this, and granted, I sat in on that meeting, the acquisition meeting, I was past the council rules, but before I was voted by the full council, so I was here and listened and tried to learn a lot. And I'm just excited to be able to put 100, for this project specifically, 102 homes to people who are needing housing. I think that when we get down to it, that's what we're trying to do, is get people into homes. And people who need homes, and we have a ginormous waiting list. And the more we can do to get people into homes, the better we're doing our jobs.
Any other comments from the board on this particular project before we have Ms. Hodges offer some suggestions on the resolution? Ms. Hodges, would you mind? And Ms. Hodges, we're being recorded. Would you be able to step up to one of the microphones? I just thought of that. I apologize. I just thought of that. Our court reporter, I'm apologizing now for the record.
Not a problem. So, just in reviewing the resolution, I just want to make sure, and it looks, the boards all have a consensus, it's a great project, we're going to move forward, but just the devil is in the details, always. So, I want to make sure that this resolution as drafted is the way that the board intends it to be. It is very broad, and it does not, for example, state the price of the project. So I don't know, and you can just leave it this broad, the way that it reads, and you know the way that it reads, Dwayne would be authorized to negotiate any terms in the best interest of the JHA. Normally, when projects come before the board, there's a term sheet or there's a contract. Clearly, it doesn't look like we have time to do that here. And that is the board's choice, but I just want to point out that this resolution is pretty broad, and, you know, something as simple as price is not even mentioned here, and I don't know if you want to do that. There was a PowerPoint that had a lot of specific data points of the project. We could insert language where we could tie in, so instead of this broad, such terms and conditions as are in the best interest, maybe you keep that, but reference back to the PowerPoint that has those specific.
Yeah, Commissioner, or,
Good.
goodness gracious, Ms. Hodges, wow.
Okay, so
That
that's
is,
general.
that is a great idea. Can we just agree to attach the pro forma that was presented to and discussed at the acquisition committee, which includes
Some data points.
those details?
Okay, gotcha. So that's one thing. The second comment is, I don't know, Dwayne, you can answer this, if there's a need to also insert language to specifically say what pot of money we're taking this out of? Or maybe that's addressed in the document you're talking about. We don't say that here.
It is not, however, the acquisition committee, thank you, Ms. Hodges. I think we discussed this comes out of COCC and the two deals that have unrestricted funds, correct, Mr. Lohr? So out of
Okay.
COCC, central
Yeah.
operating?
So if you all are okay with that, usually, again, those details, we would put that in here so that, you know, of course, Dwayne's not gonna take it out of any other pot, but just for record's sake, we would have it in here. And then, I just wanna let the board know that any sort of bond movement that you would wanna make to make this happen, here, we're just addressing the acquisition, because I believe in talking with bond counsel, we would have to come back for board resolutions, okay?
Correct, that's my understanding as well. I think
Correct.
we have Mr. Wilson here because we're gonna start underwriting and reviewing that process, but at
that's
this
the
point,
second-
yeah, like, we
second step.
can't, yeah.
Okay, so if somebody wants to make an amendment to the motion that's on the table to incorporate the pro forma that has the details about the project points, like the price, and also the funding source that the money's gonna come out of. That's just a simple amendment to the resolution that's on the table. And then everything else, Dwayne would just make the call on. Any other business points, you're entrusting him to make those decisions.
Commissioner Griggs?
Mr. Chair, based upon Ms. Hodges' comments, I might recommend that we just remove the word execute from the resolution and have Mr. Alexander come back with us after all of those documents and everything have been prepared for board approval.
So do one more final vote, one more final meeting for final approval of all documents?
Yes, we know all of the details would be there.
I can't see any harm in that. Does anybody have any specific objections to that? I mean, there's going to have to be final negotiation of documents. Ms. Hodges?
Well, and through the chair, I mean, typically on a real estate deal, the main document is the purchase and sale agreement. Like the closing documents would likely be rolled into that document. So it's really just one document that he's bringing back to the board, and you could send him forth to negotiate that. He can bring back a term sheet, or he can bring back a 30-page contract, whichever or. But the motion today would be to do that due diligence. I don't know if that would include appraisal, for example. Maybe that's already been done. But typically, you could set it up this way. You could stay on the same path you're on, okay, and just add those other suggestions. Or, as Mr. Griggs is alluding, you could also just empower Dwayne to negotiate and bring back a contract to the board for final approval.
I don't think I have an objection to that, as long as at the acquisition committee there was concern about timing.
What's the concern? Excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So what
The
would be
concern is they only have so long to close on the actual real estate before they lose the contract, and then we're told, which I mean, I have no reason not to believe that if it goes back out to market, it'll be quickly bought up because of the project going across the street. It's worth more now than it was when they put it under contract.
I mean,
But, I mean, we only need, how many days' notice for a board meeting? 7?
Right, no, you don't even need that.
3?
Yeah, we recommend
48 hours?
7, but no less than 4. As I say that, we may have actually changed that in your bylaw, so let me confirm that. Give me a second. And then also, I'll just remind the board that you engage real estate counsel, so they already have, great purchase and sale agreements. I don't think this is gonna take long, but obviously we should utilize.
Yeah, I recall we engaged real estate counsel last year sometime, if memory serves. I mean, we could also just make it subject to final review and approval of legal counsel as well.
There's no specific notice requirement, so you're just bound to the 286 reasonable notice, and I wouldn't go any, certainly the minimum would be 24 hours, but really, something like this, for no less than 48 hours.
Okay. I'll open it to the board to discuss. Would we prefer to do an approval with the pro forma attached, and then subject to Mr. Alexander and council sign off? Or would we prefer to authorize Mr. Alexander to negotiate, expend funds and diligence, bring us back, a proposed closing document for final approval, with the understanding we may be reconvening this board in the next 2 weeks, Mr. Alexander? 3 weeks?
Wednesday. She said 48 hours.
Wait,
No, I'm talking about whenever you've got to do your due diligence, you got to bring a document, you got to first work on that. What I was saying was, the notice periods, if you want to have a meeting in another 2 weeks, you want to have it on Friday, you should put that notice out probably on Tuesday, just to give the public.
Commissioner Griggs, and then, Mr. Alexander, please first.
If I may say,
Yeah.
Commissioner, we've been at this for a while. We didn't have an acquisition committee meeting. We spent a lot of time, energy. Then we have another acquisition committee. We spend a lot of time, energy. We go back, we work the numbers. These deals, it's one of the reasons why it's so very hard for public housing entities to make any progress. It's so very hard for them. One, they don't know what to do, and there's no more public funds. The other thing is that we move too slow for real estate. Now, we have to do our due diligence. I'm all for doing the due diligence 100%. But we cannot, when you're involved with real estate, you have to strike while the iron is hot. Because if you don't make that move today, then somebody else may come with much more money and buy the property or the building or anything else. And we have lost many deals because we don't move fast enough. And I'm not saying that to throw anything on anybody, but we cannot, and I think Mr. Charles said it, in this market, and working in the real estate market, we have to get out of the mind frame that we're a typical housing authority, and we have to function and think like real estate professionals. And when you're doing deals like this, when you're talking millions of dollars, we have to move quick on these deals. If that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I will say, Mr. Alexander, to your point, now you have me reconsidering my other point, or my thought process. You know, in the real estate world, when, like in an investment committee, right? When an investment committee approves the deal, they approve the deal and then authorize, you know, the CEO to go out and execute whatever it is, and then that person is responsible. I certainly, I can appreciate your position. I think this comes down to a board policy question, but I think, yeah, you make a valid point. Commissioner Shoup?
Could we, maybe as a compromise here, add the language not to exceed whatever the X number of dollars, where we've got some cap on the approval, let him run with it, where we're not getting in our own way to get 102 new units, but we still put some safeguards in there from a board perspective that we're overseeing this and we've got it. And then, like Mr. Alexander, you stated earlier that you're putting your reputation on the line on this deal and potentially the next deal. If it goes real south, that's something this board will come and discuss in a performance evaluation time and say, do we continue or not? And that's just how this would work to me. So that's just some thoughts.
Mr. Alexander, then Commissioner Griggs.
What I would add is that me, as well as all of the employees of this agency, we sit here day in and day out, and we hear the cries of folks applying who have nowhere to go, that need a roof over their head.
Yeah.
I mean, we started just 2 years ago that we only had maybe 5,000 or 6,000 people on our waiting list. Only had 5,000 or 6,000 people on our waiting list. We have more than 120,000 people on our waiting list. And we are supposed to be the vanguard for low-income families here. So we have to do something.
Commissioner Griggs, and then Commissioner Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think anyone is questioning your passion or the due diligence that you've already put into this deal. I'm simply responding to our council's concerns regarding the resolution, and to make it the easiest way for us to do it. If you can fulfill all of that stuff in 2 days, then so be it. If we have all that information in front of us, that, the final numbers and all that documentation that should be attached to the resolution, then I don't have a problem approving it. I just that takes you out of the situation, that takes board members out of it. We know exactly what we're approving on the resolution, based upon Ms. Hodges' comments. And I think it's important that it sounds like that's the standard that she's offering us, to have that information included. And so I just prefer to have a vehicle to get that done.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then, like I said, I would just recommend removing execute, and then if he prepares everything, we can approve it, So all of those things that Ms. Hodges brought up that were not included in the resolution.
So, Ms. Hodges, I believe you, just to clarify, because
Just to clarify, I just want to, of course, I'm the board's attorney, so I want to make sure that the board's protected. I just want to make sure you understand that there are no parameters in this document. There's none. But so it's up to you. You can add some, you can not add some. Dwayne's very passionate. We've heard, I don't think anybody doubts he's not gonna make sure this deal happens. But from a legal perspective, you're basically giving him a broad authority, which may not be a bad thing for this board. It's your call to make. It's not, I'm just pointing it out, that's all.
Yeah. So I would go back, I think, and again, Commissioner Brock, and then I think Commissioner Shoup. I would go back with, I tend to agree with Commissioner Shoup, which is, if you're asking for this authority, which I know you are, and you want to proceed, and I think this deal is in the best interest of the agency, I would feel comfortable saying, consistent with the pro forma presented at the acquisition committee, with a purchase price not to exceed of XYZ dollars plus reasonable closing costs. That puts some parameters around it. It allows you to proceed. It gives us comfort knowing that it's, we're buying what was presented to us, and it moves it forward without further delay, I guess is the right word at this point. Delay is not the right word, but without further debate. I would be comfortable, having an amendment to the motion to incorporate that. But then I think Ms. Brock had comments, and Commissioner Shoup, you had comments as well. Commissioner Brock?
Well, basically, Mr. Chair, you took my words, and that's what I was gonna say, that we do an amendment, put a dollar amount in there, not to exceed, yeah.
So I've got, Commissioner Shoup, sorry.
Yeah, no, my concern is if we came back, had to come back again, something would happen, we wouldn't have a quorum. And then we push it on again. We have a quorum, we're here today, let's make this happen. Like I said, I do agree though, Commissioner, that we should have some sort of parameters in this agreement now, but I know it's after 5, but let's just iron them out now and get this thing done and get people into homes.
It's not reasonable to put a dollar cap. It makes more sense because we're going to be discussing the next deal after
That's
that we
fine.
put a percent. So if it's 2.5%, 5%, whatever, we can decide on that. So we can use that same logic for the next one.
So Commissioner, when you say that, I was, and again, this is more of a, I guess, question of how we do it. I was gonna say attach the pro forma, authorize the purchase of the land consistent with the presented purchase price plus reasonable closing costs, fees, and expenses, which, you're gonna have attorney's fees, you're gonna have doc stamps, you're gonna have all of that. Okay. Commissioner Shoup?
Unless OGC wants to in-kind us some closing attorneys funds there.
They don't do that.
So are we,
So I'm seeking an amendment to the current motion is what I'm seeking. And I'm seeking an amendment that would state, adding to the end of prepare and execute any documents necessary for the due diligence of and development contract with Chase Properties. I'm adding or asking for a motion to add, consistent with the pro forma financial information previously presented to the acquisition committee and attached here too, for a purchase price of the land not to exceed $2,376,000 plus any applicable and reasonable closing costs.
And funds to come out of the.
And funds to come out of the unrestricted funds available to the Housing Authority.
can you specify the date of the last acquisition meeting, just so it's clear?
That is a great, when was that, Mr. Alexander? It
The
feels
last
like
acquisition.
yesterday. Was it,
January 5th in
oh,
the
thank you.
third whereas.
January 5th in the third whereas, Commissioner.
I'll make a motion.
Motion, seconded. The motion is to amend the current resolution to add at the end, consistent with the pro forma financial information presented to the Acquisition Committee of the Housing Authority on January 5th, 2023, with a purchase price of the land not to exceed $2,376,000 and applicable closing costs, fees, and reasonable applicable closing costs, fees, and expenses. Funds to be utilized from unrestricted housing authority funds. So we now have a motion to amend, which I think we need to move the motion to amend, and then we would move the full resolution, correct? As amended. So, well, can I just move the motion as amended? No, I have to approve the amendment. So I have a motion and a second to amend. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, I'm calling the question. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, so the resolution before us has been amended pursuant to the amendment. I have a motion and a second on the full resolution as amended. Is there any further discussion?
Quick question.
Oh,
Through-
Commissioner.
No, I know. Through the chair.
You are what I used to be.
Through the chair to OGC, you guys are good with that language now?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's-
sounds great.
Well, not what I'm good with, is what the board's good with, and so if the board has an additional layer of protection there, so that's a sufficient layer. Sorry.
Thank you.
I will call the question. All those in favor of resolution number 2023 JHA 3 as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, that resolution passes. The next resolution we have on our table is resolution number 2023 JHA 4, which is the final approval and authorization of the JWB real estate capital acquisition. As we've been through this, I'm sorry?
Resolution, if you want to move them with a similar.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna do that. I'm going to ask that we move the motion with the additional language at the end of the motion saying, purchase contract shall contain such terms and conditions that are in the best interest of the Jacksonville Housing Authority, consistent with the pro forma financial information attached here to and presented to the Housing Authority on January 5th, 2023's Acquisition Committee in a purchase price not to exceed $7,090,000 for the purchase of 30 homes, plus reasonable applicable
50?
50 homes?
Yes.
Why does it say 30, Mr. Alexander?
No, it's like 50. You don't say 30, it's like 50.
My apologies. 50 homes. What's the final acquisition amount, Mr. Alexander?
It's 11 million,
Oh, my apologies, Mr. Alexander. I'm reading from your presentation, which is, I understand the issue. My apologies. My apologies.
You're doing the zip code.
I'm doing, what's the purchase price of the full 50 lots, Mr.
what is
Alexander?
it, there's 11,
That's 30.
yeah, 11.
Thank you. 11 million, with a purchase price not to exceed $11,500,000. $590,000. Public comment's not open. The purchase price not to exceed $11,590,000 plus reasonable and applicable closing costs, funds to be utilized from unrestricted Jacksonville Housing Authority funds.
Is this part of the resolution, or is this an amendment? This
No,
is a-
I've added this to the resolution. I'm
Okay.
asking for the resolution to be moved as amended.
Thank you.
So
So
can I get a,
moved.
so moved, thank you. Can I get a second? I have a second from Commissioner Brock. Further discussion?
Yes, discussion.
Yes.
These homes are already built, correct?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. That's the exciting part. And then we'll pay from our restricted cash, or unrestricted cash, and then we will refinance with the bond.
Yes, and Commissioner Green, you just reminded me of something. Mr. Wilson came down. Can you just explain that refinancing process to the full board quickly? I know we're not authorizing that here, we're not doing that here, but I want to make sure we're all clear what the intent is from a financial structuring perspective.
Sure, I'll be real brief, but I'll try to be brief. So yeah, the thought here is that obviously when you issue bonds, you have a lot of costs that go into that. Bond counsel, our fee, our counsel fee, trustee fees. So you want to try to, if possible, aggregate as much as you can to do one bond issue because it saves you a lot of money on cost of issuance. So the thought here would be to simultaneously pay any upfront calls from housing authorities' cash balance. We'll simultaneously start working the bond issue so we can just reimburse those proceeds as soon as possible. And I think if we got started right away, you can probably close a bond issue in 60 days.
So, and again, not approving it here, but just for context, so we're looking at outlaying cash for potentially 60 days and, reimburse ourselves all or a significant portion of such cash, correct? Okay, just so we're clear. Any questions for Mr. Wilson while he's here? So,
We'll have plenty of questions when he comes back.
yes, we will. Okay, I have a resolution that's been put forth as amended. I have a motion on that. I have a second. Is there any further discussion?
Real quick. For the record, Mr. Alexander, how quick are we going to be able to put 50 families into these 50 homes after closing?
I'd say we can get them in 30 days.
So
Wow.
that's huge, guys. 30 days from closing, we're going to have 50 more families off our waiting list. That's what we're here for.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the resolution is carried. Mr. Alexander, I know this board has been active at this for 18 months to move to this point. Congratulations. Congratulations to senior staff. This is something we haven't done before, so I'm very excited and look forward to it. For better or worse, we still have the rest of the meeting to get through. I'm actually, I think the scoring, the final discussion on the scoring rubric and the development scorecard for the RFQ. The acquisition committee went through the scorecard once again. It was then circulated, I believe, to the entire board, correct, Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
And comments were then incorporated one last time to ensure that we kind of captured what each board member was looking for with respect to the scoring rubric. For those that recall, this rubric will hereafter be utilized when projects come in. The RFQ will go out. When projects come in, they will be scored in accordance with this rubric, and they will then present it to the acquisition committee for further recommendation to the board. I had no further comments on the rubric or the scorecard, but I do think it would be prudent that we open it up here to the board to see if there was any other comments before we, finalize that and authorize Mr. Alexander to utilize that. So at that point, Commissioner?
I know I'm the new guy, but if somebody could send me, or I could get a copy of that prior to voting on it, would be helpful.
Mr. Alexander, I know you were new, so it might have not gone out with you whenever.
Right.
Yeah, with the notice. I
yeah, I'm
apologize.
sure.
Could you shoot that down, Mr. Alexander? And we'll hold on that. For the rest of the board that should have got a copy of it, was there any further edits, or did everybody see their edits incorporated or questions answered from Mr. Alexander? If there were any. There you go, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you.
I actually didn't see the final,
Do you, if you have enough, can you just pass them out, Mr. Alexander? Thank you.
and I think we should take a second and just review and vote on it so we can move deals.
That's what I was going to ask. Is there a pressing where we need to do this at this meeting, or can we defer this where we have some time to?
We've
Okay.
deferred it twice. I'd like to get a vote on it, and if we decide that something needs to be adjusted, I think we can come back and adjust it, but we've deferred it twice, unfortunately.
I did,
The second one? Thank you.
Here you go.
So again, just for the benefit of everybody, we went through and reallocated certain aspects of this rubric based on some very astute points made at our acquisition committee meeting to really hone in on what we thought was a good balance between what we needed versus where we originally started. One thing I'd like to add, which is obviously to the extent that we approve this and we decide 90 days later we don't love it because this is procurement, and Ms. Hodges are going to hate me. Rolling RFQ is what I call it. There's some other term that makes more sense, but because it renews every 30 day, if we don't like the rubric for whatever reason, we certainly can amend that down the road to adjust it as we see fit. But I would say I'm very, again, I asked for this, and I think, frankly, Commissioner Phillips, who's no longer here on the board, she asked for this, and I think it's a great thing that we did to put this together that really helps us hone in on what we're trying to do, so.
This is great. I'd like to say thank you, Mr. Alexander, for incorporating all of our feedback after numerous discussion. I think this is excellent. And if we can, I'd like to make a motion to approve this and move forward. Unless there's questions. I think this is great.
I have a motion. Can I get a second for for any discussion? I have a second from Commissioner Griggs. Any further discussion on the scoring rubric?
And this is just to bring it to the board once they hit their number.
That's a great, yes. So for clarification, the last two deals that we did were sole source, right? They had the deals, they brought them to us. This is a deal where somebody wants to propose something to us, meaning they haven't secured it or whatever else. This is a rubric that we will then score those deals on to ensure that, there's a consistency to how we're looking at deals. This does not mean Mr. Alexander can go buy the deals.
No, I know that.
This merely says that he will then have a scoring rubric that the acquisition committee can review, and if the acquisition committee believes it's in the board's best interest to consider, we'll make a recommendation at that time.
And every developer will have access to this, it'll be on the
It'll be part of
website.
the RFQ that is published.
Yep. Cool.
Any further questions or discussions? I'm letting Commissioner, somebody say something so Commissioner Shoup can finish reading it.
We also said that our preference would be to see things that scored over 70%, but if Mr. Alexander thought there was a deal that was worth our time, that he could bring deals that scored lower, but just a posture to any developer that we would like to see 70 or more.
Yeah.
Question, does the 70 get us a dollar-to-dollar return, or how?
That's part of the, you'll see in here, part of the questions we have in here, Commissioner, are, what does JHA's percentage of fee splits? What does our ownership look like? Is there an actual financial incentive for us to look at this project, or are we, just basically asking to do it on a whim? But yes, to your point, there are those calculations that are to be made.
It looked like it was page 5. I just got there.
Yes, page 5, correct.
Yep. I will say with my very brief and quick review, I'm okay.
Fantastic. So I have a motion, I have a second. I'll go ahead and call the question. All those in favor of approving the scoring rubrics for use of the projects on the RFQ signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none. Thank you very much to this board. Mr. Alexander, obviously you guys are now good to proceed with the RFQs. Okay. At this point, I think we are through officer elections and standing committees, which is fantastic. I will defer my chair. Oh, actually, yeah, I'll defer my chair's comment 1 second. Mr. Alexander, it is already 6 o'clock. Not that that matters. However, would you please give us your expedited CEO highlight reviews?
Great. First, were there any questions on the operation report? One of the key things on it, if you look on there, the unit turnaround time at the time was 13 days. Staff has done a good job and got it down to 7 days, which helps give you an A if you have an 10-day, and they finally got it down to 7 days. Also, we had REACT. We didn't receive the score back from Centennial Towers, but we did receive a REACT score from Brentwood, which was 82, and at Southwind, which is 95. What that means, we won't be tested again at Brentwood for another 2 years, and we won't be tested at Southwind for another 3 years. At least have an inspection there. Also, I'm not sure, but I want to bring to your attention, they had a news report on a resident that had pest in her unit. And I just wanted to give the board an update how we addressed that. When we found out that the lady had rodents in her unit, we addressed it. But when I found out about it, me and Ms. Dunn, who's the chief operating officer, we went in there and had the lady placed in a hotel. And we had a place in the hotel, we had the unit completely stripped and remodeled. We had a professional pest control company go in and seal all the entries to that unit. We also put boxes, bait boxes outside the whole entire building. We actually trimmed the trees back from the building because there appeared to be roof rodents. There's 6 people that actually have 6 units in that building. It was only one family that had a problem, and it might have been one other family that was suspected of having something in that unit. But nevertheless, we sealed that whole entire building up. We addressed the unit, remodeled the unit. On the 13th of this month, we will go out and tent that whole entire building. We would tent it, and after tenting it, we will allow the residents to go back in there within 3 days. The tenant was happy with the conversion of the unit, and they had no problems. Typically, when we go in and we move the resident out there, we sort of bait the unit to see if we can catch anything in there. There was no signs of anything in that building, but it may be something somewhere around there, so that's why we want to tint the building. Also, on a good note, our family self-sufficiency program, we was awarded $428,736 for 6 positions. Now, this award is given every year, and it's not guaranteed, because some housing authorities don't even get it, but we got $428,000 for 6 positions. And also, we was very lucky to get the Ross grant, which is $421,000. Now, the FSS is for the family self-sufficiency, and the Ross is for the self-sufficiency as well. That's $421,724,000. And that grant, the difference between the Ross and the FSS is every year. You have to apply to get the money, and that Ross grant money is for 3 years. Also, I did, staff worked along with me, and you can thank Ms. Court and Ms. Sims and Ms. Anita to put these books together. We attended the conference, the commissioners' conference, and we put these books together for you with all the training at the conference that you could be able to look into and get some information out of it in case you missed any of the classes that, yes, okay.
Do you have?
Did you get one?
No, sir.
So it contains all the materials from all the training sessions in here. They had some very good sessions. We thought the conference was very good. General counsel attended the conference.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
highly offended that you put how to run a board meeting in here.
Well,
Just to be
that's-
clear, Mr. Alexander.
well, that was one of the trainings here.
I'm
yes,
just kidding.
yes,
Under 2 hours.
yes,
That's on the record.
yes.
Do we have these electronically?
Huh?
Do we have these materials electronically?
Yes, I'll send it to you electronically. Yes. And also, and one last thing, we hand out new passwords for Mr. Charles, Mr. Shoup, and Ms. Brock, because the rest of the commissioners use the JHA email. I wanted to make sure that you all had the JHA email, so you can get your JHA email, so that if they ever have a public record request, they pull the information from your JHA email instead of your personal email, because some of us use our personal email. So I want to make sure that you all use the JHA email. And that's why we distributed the process on how to get into your email underneath JHA. And that concludes my report. Any questions?
Just
None.
a question or comment. If we could not do those arrows, it makes it hard to see.
Okay.
For me, it blocks a lot of the numbers. That's a great report of it, the whole thing. Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Brock?
Through the chair to Mr. Alexander, I don't have any questions, but I want to say, job well done on those grants that we received.
Yes.
Really, I know a lot of work went into it. I know it goes through you and resident services, so want to say a job well done on those grants.
Well, I take no credit. We have to give all the credit to our longest agency employee, who is Ms. Parker, who's been here going on 35 or 36 years.
Wow, congratulations.
35?
I just made 34 years.
Okay, 34 or 35?
I'm in the 35th.
You're
Okay,
in the
35th,
35th.
yeah.
Wow, that's
Yes. All in resident services.
that's amazing.
So she got the formula and got us almost 800, a little bit more than $800,000.
Wow.
That goes all to residents. So y'all can give her a round of applause.
That's awesome. Any other questions for Mr. Alexander?
Yes, through the chair, the vouch, is that the military vouchers?
Oh,
I just remember a couple meetings ago,
Yeah.
we had a discussion about that.
And I think the problem in deploying them is because we can't get
yeah.
fast enough cooperation with the VA to get the referrals and everything else, right? Commissioner Shoup?
So that's something when I was in the limbo land, Mr. Alexander gave me a tour, and I saw the "Are you a veteran?" We have voucher sign. One of the things I do in my day job is I do a lot of work with the Veterans Treatment Court here in Duval County, and they have needs to put people into houses. So Mr. Alexander and I are supposed to get with the folks who I can put the VTC folks with, where they can start getting these. They've got people looking for housing as we speak, so it'll be a great partnership there.
Commissioner Brock?
I want to congratulate my new commissioner if he gets the job done with the vouch vouchers, because them people, they not bending. They talking about them people gotta be homeless for like a year, all kind of foolishness. Yeah, we done tried. Yeah, for real. They call me all the time, veterans do, trying to get a voucher. And Mr. Love, I know him by name, he's the intake person. He's really, for real.
Mr. Alexander, to the extent we can, see if there's anything we can do with the VA to expedite or modify or
Yes.
whatever the process. I feel like we talk about this every month, which is
Right.
unfortunate, but
Exactly.
that is what it is. Anything else for Mr. Alexander? Any questions? Hearing none, I'm going to move to the chair's comments quickly. Mr. Alexander, I'm loath to report that we are behind in Mr. Alexander's 360 review. I have completed he has completed his self-evaluation, which has been plugged into the HR team. Ms. Court has been willing to help us coordinate all of this. After this meeting, each of you will receive an evaluation form as well. Prior to the next meeting, if you would be willing to please fill out that information and send it to Ms. Court. I will then coordinate with Ms. Court to combine the information and do a board/CEO sit-down evaluation per the terms of employment agreement, and then bring it back to the board for their final review and approvals. Is there any questions around that process? I'm hoping to have this done within the next 2 weeks. We are behind on this reporting, which is my fault, so I apologize for that. My only other closing comments, which I think, again, it's been a long time in the waiting, but this was a very progressive and forward-facing board meeting, and I really appreciate everybody's time and efforts in this. And with that, are there any other closing comments from anybody?
Thank you to staff for everything that you do.
Yeah.
Thank you very much to the staff, to senior staff, to Mr. Alexander. If there's no further comments, I'll deem this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.